The gang is back. Oh, well, except for associate producer Joel. But Eric Wyken is here. Eric, how are you? Welcome to the Swim Brief, everybody. Also, by the way, my name's Chris.
Yes, still Eric. Been a while. Been a sectional meet. Couple of work trips. A wedding for my sister. It's been quite a 6 weeks since the last time I think I've been on. So good to be back.
Yep. I went to our senior champs meet and gave myself back spasms. So that's been awesome. Been rehabbing
What happens
that
when you get older.
Yep, which is another thing that's been happening recently. So I thought, in honor of my pain in my back, we would talk about the pain in the back that exists for all sorts of people that choose to be a part of this great sport of swimming. And we're going to start with some job postings. They're going to get us sort of be our appetizer for this. But, you know, we have been hard on some people for their job postings. This time, I don't so much want to be hard on the people posting jobs. I actually want to take a little bit more of an empathetic look at what are some of the sort of really challenging parts of being involved in swimming for all the people involved. And specifically, we're talking about club swimming here in the United States. You know, what are the parts that are really hard for swimmers right now? What are the parts that are really hard for parents right now? What are the parts that are really hard for coaches? And maybe a little bit try to figure out how we got here, and then offer no solutions whatsoever. How does that sound, Eric?
I'm really good at that.
Yeah, we're just gonna talk about them. No, but you know what? People always say like, "Well, you don't offer any solutions." Look, I think if I knew the solutions to all these things, I probably wouldn't just be talking about it on a podcast. I'd be out selling that because the stuff we're going to talk about, I think, is really painful for people, and there's a lot of people that would pay money to fix it if they could. But the solutions are not obvious, can't be generalized, I think, especially when you start to get into the nitty gritty of all these places and the unique circumstances. And, you know, people may not even understand exactly what it is bothering them until they hear some of this. And, you know, the goal here is not for people to use that as a bludgeon to bludgeon someone else. It's all your fault, you know, but to get a better sense of how the whole system is working, then you might be able to work cooperatively with those other people that are inside your own system and fix it. But let's look at a job posting. So what do you got for me first? You sent some along here as we were chatting. Oh, we had the Helena Lions swim team is, you know, let me, for those of you watching the video version of this, let me go ahead and close all my tabs.
Yeah, get rid of those more plates, more dates video tabs.
Right. Close all my tabs, close my ads. Look at this. This is Helena, Montana, which I assume is a beautiful place. They're looking for a head coach. They want them to do all the head coach things, run a team, coach, schedule, get swimmers into the program and retain them. And they're offering to pay 34 to 36, a very narrow band, which is funny because the next one we're going to do is kind of the opposite of this one. But this is, you know, this is not an atypical head coach of a swim club job posting in the United States. Would you agree?
I would agree. This is a very vanilla everything that you do except for some of the dry side stuff that they may try to remove, especially with 501c3 teams, keeping them out of the finance side of things,
Right.
just for ease. Unless of course you have a coach that comes in with that background that's willing to take that on, and obviously compensation might increase if they're not paying somebody else to do that. But you see this a lot with board run teams where they just kind of remove all of the scary stuff out of it. They just run the team. So
Right. And we'll get to that later, you know, like that probably is going to be just already setting off some alarm bells with people in terms of as I call them, I'm just going to call them pain points, like literally the points that cause pain for people interacting with the sport of swimming. And I think especially for coaches, what you just described, you know, definitely sets off some alarm bells. You know, I think, yeah, I don't need to do any research into Helena, Montana. I think, you know, you can certainly do your own if you want. I don't think that $35,000 a year puts you in a really great financial position pretty much anywhere in the United States. And maybe it's okay, sort of passable there in Montana. But I point that out not to make fun of the Helena Lions, but more to say this is pretty typical. If you sort of cross compare it to other communities across the country, how much they might be paying somebody to do this for their swim club, it's probably pretty comparable, right?
Yeah, and as we're seeing, this is essentially like minimum wage.
It is becoming minimum wage, because you think about what do you know, like in my area, I know the minimum wage is not technically even $15 an hour, but I pay at least $15 an hour for a babysitter. That's off the books. And you know, most of the sort of low end service jobs in my area that I see advertising are paying in excess of that. So, you know, if you make, say, $20 an hour and you work 40 hours a week full time, you're going to come pretty close to this as a salary, without having done the math myself. We did the math on this one time off.
Yeah.
You fill time for a little bit. I'll do the math on.
Yeah, I think a couple of the interesting things we're seeing here is we see with a lot of them, there's a lot of ambiguity and vagueness in this. So you're left guessing like what exactly all is involved. Obviously, it just comes across as a small town with a small team. You don't see anything speaking about health insurance, so that's probably something that you're going to be on your own for. You know, and one of the things that I find interesting a lot with a lot of these smaller teams, and I'm sure we'll get into this, is where the fundraising aspect comes into. This isn't one of the primary responsibilities of this position, but you can guarantee it definitely is. Like, you're going to have to be heavily involved in some way, shape, or form, despite which, you know, I've come across many a coach who claim to only be deck coaches. But if you're not fundraising, you're not bringing in money to even have somebody come in, let alone the travel budget to take a kid to nationals. So, you know, it is interesting to see some of this and where this is going. And I suppose eventually we'll talk about swim meets, right? So
I'm trying to find the Loveland, Colorado job. I just did a search in the
full time. There it is.
Well, this is the head coaching job, though, right?
Oh, that was from way ago. Yeah, if you just go to the standard listing for the day, if you go to more, yeah, it should be on the right.
Should be right in here.
That's
Oh, there
Yeah,
it is.
there we go.
Junior National
Just
Development.
you all swim jobs. I'm helping Chris learn how to
Oh no,
do
sorry,
his
this is the
thing.
wrong one. This is
Yeah. Just
that's the one in so see it's already
yeah, it's already gone. The U Pike job came up. So
here it is. Okay, so this is a job, you know, that I noticed too in that last team, that was a 45-person team. This is a significantly bigger team, not a big team, I guess, depending on what your definition of big team is. We'll get into that a bit. But 180 swimmers, and they've got some swim lessons incorporated, and they're looking for somebody essentially to run their age group part of the team. They have a massive salary range all the way from 35,000 to 55,000. By the way, I did the math, and actually, if you get paid $20 an hour and you work 40 hours a week, you make way more than $34,000 a year. It's like more like 40K. So, and I know that's not official minimum wage, but it's essentially in most jobs becoming a de facto minimum wage, which I happen to think is a good thing. But this one, you know, a few more pieces of information about benefits. You get your phone paid for, which of course I immediately read.
partly
People, oh, a stipend, right?
it just says
People,
stipend. Gotta be.
and then people can call you whenever they want. Healthcare stipend. You have 4 weeks of vacation. You might make more money for working more. Performance bonuses, moving expenses as needed, continuing education and support.
That's actually really nice.
Yeah.
Not everybody has that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember when I went to Georgia Tech, actually, they gave you 1/10 of your salary to move there, which I thought was amazing.
Wow, that
at
is
the time.
fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really nice. And you know, so little things like that are appreciated. But I actually think the reason I wanted to put this one up here is, Eric, I feel like there are like hundreds of this type of job available. Maybe it's
Yeah.
not hundreds because there aren't that many swim clubs in America, but it might as well be for the amount that I see out there. Would you agree?
We're seeing at least probably 1 to 2 of these posts weekly as far as
Right.
major lead positions within a staff, or head age group coach, or like the one that you kind of pulled up was a junior / national team development coach, which is a big factor in larger teams. This right here is a large team in the Colorado area.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a lot of this going around, and it seems like some of these teams, yes, the range is large, but the top end here at 55 is, for Colorado, is a little on the low side, but definitely for somebody who's working their way up in the club ranks is a nice place to be for a bit, especially if you have the resume to be able to cover that. I don't think.
Right. I wonder what the criteria
club,
for paying somebody 55.
Yeah.
Seems like they expect quite a range of
applicants, but I can't imagine that you're going to get anybody who's going to be okay with the bottom range when the entire range is shown there, especially with cost of living and how that's changed over the last 6 months, and it being in Colorado, the Fort Collins area. So you just have an expectation that you're going to get people expecting the higher end. And I mean, there's a lot of coaches that are worth that and worth that time, and I think it just have to expect it.
So I want to work through producer Joel. Couldn't be here. Sent us his brief history.
15 text messages.
Yeah, I know. It's like one of those things you step away from your phone or your computer or whatever, and you come back and go, who texted me that many times? And that, like,
so for those of you who don't know Joel, he is the king of stream of consciousness texting.
Right.
And we love him to death, but then like he'll throw in the one part of the question, and then you'll have like 7 or 8 text messages of backfill. and then might be the rest of the question. And then you got to go back and sometimes ask him what, because it's all like really great stuff. Like it's all like coherent thinking is just, you kind of get lost in the detail. So
I would also estimate that if somebody were to like do a deep data analysis of our group texts, they would be like 2/3 you, Eric, and then like 20% me, and then the remaining whatever, like 14% or whatever is Joel, but in tiny little condensed, like you don't hear anything from him for days, and then he just like downloads his entire consciousness
it's like when
onto you.
It's like when he gives you some video feedback and it's like 15 text messages in a row, and it's just solid gold.
Right.
And then it's just
like, what do you think of this girl's fly? And I don't hear anything. And then later it's like I've got diagrams with stuff drawn on them and like descriptions, and there's just like words. I go like, what does that mean even? Like, anyway, he gave us his brief history of club swimming development in the United States. And I'm not smart enough to disagree with any of this, or as old as Joel, so I can't disagree with his knowledge of history. So I'm just going to summarize it here, and then we're going to get into some of these potential pain points. Okay. So essentially, he talks about how a lot of club swimming in America, and a lot of it still is to a certain extent, the certain, like essentially a mom and pop kind of club. I think even that Helena one, you're talking about a team of 50 people. That's a very intimate setting for swimming. But, clubs maybe that size all the way up to 75 or 100 people on them. There's a bunch of, if you're living in an area, a sort of a lightly populated or decently populated area, you're going to have a couple options, right? Wherever there's a pool that's available. And maybe even if there's a pool that's available, there's going to be multiple teams practicing out of there. And these teams sort of historically had decent people coaching them, people that certainly cared a lot about swimming and did a good job at the coaching part. And I think part of that was because as I saw it, coaching used to be more of a like, hey, you don't have to commit all the way to this in your life. You don't have to give your whole life to this. This is kind of not a quote unquote real job, but create a good environment for the kids, teach them something about the sport, be a positive force in young people's lives, right? And you get paid a little money for it, and do whatever you want with the rest of your time. And then you have a progression more towards, and I think this is where I disagree with Joel's timeline. He talks about the 2000s rise of the mega club. I do think that we have seen over time a growth in club sizes in terms of the top clubs in America. It seems to be always like bigger is better, and consolidation and all that stuff is the trend where everything's going. But I think it's been happening for a lot longer than since the 2000s. I think that's been a pretty consistent trend probably since the 1970s, that teams get bigger and bigger. And part of getting bigger was, okay, we're at a size now where the money that we're pulling in, we're going to hire a coach, and that coach is going to live and breathe this team. Like, we want to be really competitive. We want somebody who is all in life and all in, committed to this. And that can be a really positive development for everybody involved, because when you don't have a sort of fully professional coach, I would say in that sense, right, there are downsides to that, where it's just like, okay, they're not there when you need them for something, or there's long periods where people are out of the water or not doing something, or et cetera, right? So what do you think of that sort of timeline? Do you have any comments to add to it?
I think you're right. It's just been it's been a long time coming, and we're really seeing what we're seeing now is, I don't even know if it's ever really changed. Just what I see now, being on the outside looking in, it's people are having to make decisions, and clubs are having to make decisions, and how they structure things and how they go about things. But yeah, it's the
Right.
small teams. The small teams will continue to be small.
Yeah, and if you're bigger, right, you may have more full-time people. Like we're a club of 300 people. We have, I think we're up to 5 full-time coaching staff. When so, and then of course you've got more stuff to fill in, so you're going to have a bunch of hourly people, and this is where I think we get into some of the pain points, and some of these I think have to do with what's going on in the rest of the world. I have noticed that anything, I think this is like a trend everywhere. It is harder to find people for part-time, hourly paid stuff.
Yeah,
Like,
because it's so difficult in swimming because of what is demanded
right,
of these positions, and not even so much from an hourly standpoint, which can escalate really, really quickly, especially when you get into the summer months.
right,
But it's the swimming education background that is really paramount to some of these part-time positions, because some of these part-time positions are group leads.
right,
And sometimes you have to be really lucky to find somebody who works during the day and also has the energy and desire to work another job at night. Those people are few and far between, or you get lucky enough to where somebody has a situation to where they're recently retired,
right,
but they still have that passion for it, or they're in a relationship to where they don't have to have a full-time job on top of this part-time job to make sure that the lights stay on. So and those just don't happen. And if you find somebody young, they're not going to stay there very long. They're either going to move up to another position in another club, or they're going to be asking for that full-time status within your club. And if it's not there, we're gone. So
yeah. I mean, give you an example like of what the sweet spot is, because I think we have it at Wahoo's. I mean, so the first person that you would be coached by on our club, the guy that coaches our minis group, so the youngest kids that come in, and the next tier up, he's the lead coach for that and our sort of 3rd age group team. We have 3 age group teams and then up to the national squad. That guy has been with the club for easily 30 years. He's a school teacher and he coaches part-time. And like, you're just, I can't imagine how many people are frustrated listening to this. Just dreaming of having somebody who really knows how to work with kids, and really knows a lot about swimming and is willing to work part-time and teach the youngest kids on your team.
Yeah.
Like that's the ideal, but realistically, that is really, really, really hard to find for most places.
Yeah, because your most qualified coaches don't want to work in developmental.
Yeah,
because it's you're an entertainer, you're a comedian, you're on for an hour. Like there's no getting around.
Or they're like me, like their ego is so inflated, like they're like, I don't coach
like
little kids, you know what I
they're
mean?
too
Like,
good for it, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of that. It is hard to get people to want to do that full time, and I think if you can navigate around the idea of having to be at the top level, there are some people you get fortunate enough towards, like, they're amazing coaches, they could coach at the senior and national level, but they don't get the same, they don't get the same joy out of that as working with 6, 7, and 8-year-olds, and it being fun essentially every single day, and teaching them the basics and the joy of the sport. So yeah, you guys do have it great. I don't know. I mean, if he's teaching full time and he's been doing this for 30 years, he's got to be retiring soon, or just
Well, I mean,
for the love of it.
We'll see how much longer we can hold on to him. I think
Well,
we'll hold
not
on for
necessarily
dear
you,
life.
but like in terms of the
Yeah.
teaching aspect of it.
Yeah.
I mean, the teaching, he's got to be getting close to those numbers to where he just peace out.
Right. He's got kids on the team as well, so I mean that keeps him invested in a certain way in what's going on. I think so. Another part of this that Joel points out that I think is important is too, I think there, beyond those kind of niche people like the ones we just discussed, you had maybe some people who wanted to get in hourly and essentially pay their dues, right? Because it was going to lead to full-time. But I find there's just less and less people who are interested in full-time jobs in swimming, partially because I think there has been this change, as we discussed, over time, from it being sort of more of a, I don't know what word to use for this, but like a leisure job, to it's like, so yes, it didn't pay very well, but maybe you could have a bunch of other things going on. And it seems to have moved, or the perception at a lot of places is that it's moved to, this will demand all your time, and the pay will be relatively low in comparison to many other jobs that an educated person in America could do.
Yeah.
Right. So that's one part of it. So when you break that cycle of the people, like young people who are willing to go, like, I'm investing in my future. Yes, I'm doing this hourly thing, and sometimes I'm not going to get paid for all the hours that I'm doing, but like, I want to be, I could say this because Joel's not here, a big time swim coach someday, right? There's just seems to be less and less people hooked. My perception is that there's less and less people hooked on that dream.
I'm curious with a lot of it too. And again, I'm able to look back in hindsight and looking at what communication is happening from a team, from a head coach, and say if it's the owner, the head coach and owner of it, and even, the parent board, what communication is happening from them to their membership in order to have like realistic expectations of the people that are brought in. Yeah. So either these parents need to know that they have these part-time people, and they're here out of the goodness of their heart a lot of times. And if they're going to have, if you have families and you have parents, and the whole thing is shifting to be more professional, if we are going to be a more professional group of people, then we need to be compensated as such. But that, I don't think that's communicated to some of the professionals that you're catering to within your swim families, because there are probably some who don't care how little you get paid. But I can guarantee you there's a good number of those swim parents that you're catering to that are professionals, that if they found out how little their coaches were being paid, they might actually do something about it, or not look at the dues that they're paying monthly and be like, oh, this makes sense. Like, this person cannot survive on this salary. Now, I don't know.
Well, so I think you're getting into a point here, which I think there's two ends of this that I want to have empathy for both. I think one of them is I don't think like membership at swim clubs is particularly expensive. Now, maybe that's a bougie East Coast elitist opinion of mine, but I think when you actually factor out, how much it costs to be on your local club swimming team in terms of membership dues, and then what you get for it, I know that we do this internally on the other side. We actually calculate how much people are paying per hour to have their kid at a coached practice. And it's not very much. I don't want to reveal the proprietary formula or anything, but it's not very much. And I don't think we're out of line with most other places in America, it's pretty similar. So when you break it down to that cost level, it's very inexpensive. But for parents, one part I want to have empathy for is having your kids seriously engaged in the sport of swimming is expensive for you as a family.
Yeah.
It's expensive for you because your expenses go way beyond the cost of putting them on a swim team. You know, first to stuff that is like tangible costs, the costs of, you know, travel, swim meets, hotels, transportation, food, all that kind of stuff. But even just like, if you have professionals, as you say, and our main client base in the sport of swimming are upper middle class families, okay? Calculate the hourly wage of those people, and then the amount of time they're going to spend driving their kid to swim practice, driving their kid home from swim practice, going to a swim meet for 3 days, all day. Like, that stuff costs a lot to families. So, you know, it's kind of one of those things where somehow you can have a situation where, like, if you say to a parent, like you're not paying very much for this, you know, and that means like the coaches aren't getting paid very well. Well, they're going to come back and you go, actually, I'm paying a lot to have my kid involved in the sport of swimming, right?
Yeah, it just doesn't all go to the team. It goes to what it takes to be on the team.
Very little
forgot
of
equipment.
it.
You forgot goggles. You forgot tech suits.
Tech suits. Oh my God. And then your tech suit wears out. Those guys from Speedo don't build them to last. You know what I mean, Eric?
Yeah. It's a conspiracy, right?
That's a joke, guys. Buy Speedo suits. You can wear them. Eric guarantees you can wear them as many times as you want.
Yeah, can't guarantee what they look like after the 100th use, but you can wear them as many times as you want. If anybody's been to open swim at any community pool or a YMCA, there are plenty of older people who will wear suits well past their date.
Right. And I think another part of this with the hourly that I want to get to, and I'll tell you a story about this. I was dropping off my son at his camp for the summer, 4-year-old. And his teacher saw me with my swim club shirt on, and she was like, "Can I talk to you for 5 minutes?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. What's up?" You know, she goes like, so you coach swimming, right? I said, "Yeah." She said, "Can you help me like with I got 2 kids that are swimming and I just need some advice." I said, "Sure. Like, what's going on?" She said, "Look, they've been swimming this year and I don't even know who their coach is. Like, they've had 4 different coaches throughout the year because there's been so much sort of part-time instability in who's responsible for the group that they're in, that like, I'm confused at this point. I don't know who to contact, you know, like about what's going on with my kids in the sport." And I think, I don't know what it was like for you growing up, but I always tell people, like, I had, from the age of 14 to when I finished high school, I think I had at least 6 different coaches. So, you know, it's not uncommon for there to be a lot of instability. And then again, this contributes to parents going, okay, this is expensive for me to part of. And what am I getting? It seems like a chaotic situation on the other end. Right.
It sounds like she's not getting what she's paying for.
Well, maybe she is getting what she's paying for.
Well, that's
right.
But we don't know what she's paying.
We don't know. And I'm not outing the swim club that's involved here. You know, like,
no, I mean, I had a consistent senior coach, and then there was a supporting cast that rotated around.
This was in Lincoln when you were coaching in Lincoln.
No, this is me as a kid when I was swimming,
okay.
Right.
Okay.
You know, from age 13 on, it was the same senior coach, but then some of the assistants had come and gone. Some of them would rotate in and out depending upon availability. But yeah, in terms of me being the head coach there, I did have a little bit of a rotation in and out. You know, some people just moving on with different parts of their lives, taking a teach. Like, for example, there's a lot of teachers that are coaching obviously all over the place, especially in Lincoln. They take a job in Omaha, so they got to go. One of my coaches started an NAI program up the road in Fremont. So it was like, you just kind of have those things that happen. But and that's where I struggle with the head coaching positions that are out there, the things that I hear, the lead coaches and all that stuff. And it's like, you listen to a story that you have right there, where it's like, has had 4 coaches, don't know the coach's name. Can't send an email, can't, like, there isn't a mass text, there isn't like some kind of notification or even a meeting. Like, you know, we're trying to find the right person when we're auditioning people. Like, make something up, I don't know. But the fact that she doesn't know the name of the coach of her kids, and it's the 4th coach in the season, it's like, rotation and attrition aside,
Right. There's a communications issue there.
There's not, some of these clubs and some of these coaches aren't helping themselves with the way that they're managing it. And again, that's where that ego comes into play. Is you can't. There are people who think they are above email, and they're above text and phone calls and getting back to you. And it's like, no, nobody is above any of that. It's like the same thing. Like, you're not above cleaning, the pool deck. It's. I think there's a whole host of problems. We're trying to we're just trying to plug all the holes in the dam, and the new one's just a rise. But yeah, it seems like there could be more.
And I think we haven't talked so much about what the athletes are experiencing, but this is one moment where I think, all the stuff we just talked about, the athletes hopefully have no knowledge of whatsoever. So what are they seeing? They're seeing, wow, my parents seem real stressed about this thing I'm doing. And the people, like whoever's coaching me, also seems real stressed, like sort of
the third
at their
one.
limit. We're on guy number 3, and he seems real like on edge every day at practice. Like, is there something wrong with me? Am I doing it wrong? Like, is this just like the sport of swimming? Is stressed out people yelling at me? Like, there is a point at which, at the end of this, kids can really get the brunt of all these sort of things flowing together to make it just not a pleasant experience for them to be part of the sport of swimming, right? And if we care about swimming, like, that has to be mission number 1, that kids have a good time doing our sport. Like, so what else do we have on our pain point?
You brought up meets. I think we've talked about this a couple of times, and how ridiculous the structure of USA.
Did I bring up meets in our group text? Did I say anything about meets, Eric? I don't know. Did I say anything about meets? I don't remember.
I think
I was in a tough place.
Maybe once or twice you talked about meets, but yeah, it's the thing. Like, we're one of the few sports in the world where we hold developmental swimmers, and not the USA Swimming Award level developmental swimmers. Those are 17 to 8. Those are 15 to 18-year-olds making national teams. Like, the true developmental level, 6, 7, 8, can barely find the goggles that are on their head kind of kid. They are expected to be able to manage the same rules and requirements and regulations as the 17 or 18-year-olds who've been doing it for 10 years. Is there another sport that does that? I honestly, gymnastics, but even then, like, their degree of difficulty and what they're doing is not nearly the same.
You're asking a guy I was at a summer league swim meet yesterday. Now, given this was not an official dual meet, right? So this was a B meet. This was for kids that weren't on the top summer league.
The travel team for the summer league.
The travel team for summer league, whatever. So I was at this meet yesterday, and there were no officials to speak of. It was a parent starting the races, and I don't know if they were trained in officiating at all, to be honest with you. I know the parent. I'll ask them later, I guess. And you know what? It seemed just fine. There were some timers there to get the times at the end of the lane. They had to be reminded sometimes that they were supposed to start on the flash and not the sound, but it was like, and I can remember also coaching in Denmark and the competitions being, sometimes 8, 9, 10-hour sessions. And I went, this is horrendous. Can we have a dual meet with another team? All the kids in my group can swim and we'll finish in 2 hours on a Saturday and that'll be it. And people were like, well, we need 20 officials to do the meet. And I went, we need what?
20? How many lanes are there?
We need, eventually we were able to run it with like a skeleton crew of officials. Essentially, we found out that it's really up to the people that are organizing the meet. In that instance, how many was a real minimum, because you've been to high school dual meets where it's a starter and one person walks up the side of the pool.
Yeah,
right?
And they miss so many calls and so many false starts.
But in the end, does it really matter? Does it really matter? Because
in most dual meets, no.
No, it doesn't. And I think this is a good example of this pain point goes across all, and I'll give the PG version of my rants that I shared with you guys over text messages. What bothers me is I think there's been a race to the bottom with swim meets. Okay. And what I mean by that is, so swim meets became, in a certain sense, and I saw this in Denmark too, the reason why we had these 8, 9, 10-hour sessions was they would say, well, the swim meet is a revenue generating thing for our team. Don't pay attention to the fact that we're actually revenue neutral with the money we spend going to other people's swim meets and then the money we intake for our swim meets. Just set aside the logical fallacy there. But people would go we need this swim meet to be as full as we can possibly make it because we need to maximize the revenue that we're getting from it. And people all across the country are struggling to find places to host meets because they can't get the economics of it to work for them. So I understand why any rational person hosting a swim meet would want to get as many people as they possibly can into that swim meet. But what it results in, I think, is a cheapened experience for the people that are there. Okay. It's not a nice competition for people that, get to the pool to warm up at 6:30 in the morning. And then maybe they're there until 2:00 racing. Right. That's not close to a good competitive experience. And it strikes me that we've just cheapened it. And so people are there and they go I don't think this swim meet's that great, but they don't understand how we got to having a swim meet that's not that great. And this is the king of things where I am just a whiner without any solutions, because if I come back and say, we'll have less people at the swim meet, set a higher time standards for all these things, and then you run into all these problems with teams. We're no, now we got to send our kids to this meet, and the coaches are here and there and everywhere. And so
that's tough.
It's really tough. We got to find officials for all these places and on and on and on and on and on. So it's really tough that we got here, but I do think, it's a valid pain point that our competitions are not really competitions in the way you would perceive in a lot of sports where it's we show up a couple hours, it's over.
Yeah, and it's tough because teams have to decide how they're going to balance the books. I know you talked about it, or it's that in that posting for Loveland, it was 5 to 8 meets a year. The last club team that I worked for, they had to host 10 meets a year. Part of it was
you should barely go to 10 meets a year.
Yeah,
Like
I
that's a
know.
normal
So
amount of meets
yeah,
to
and
go
it's a
in for
matter
a
of
year.
it's a matter of your hosting meets that makes sense in terms of your schedule. The one benefit of that is that because we hosted so many, there were a lot of times when we weren't traveling. We didn't have to travel to meet, so there's some of that cost was mitigated that way. But you have to pay for a lot of lane space and a really nice natatorium in that case. But a lot of teams have to make the decision. Okay, if you have to make ends meet and you have to balance it, you got to do it one of two ways. You either fundraise or you raise your fees. You can kind of do a combination of both, but how are you fundraising? Because you can only get, I think Chipotle reduced the amount that they actually gave back. I think it's down to about 30+%. It used to be 50-50. So you could
Sorry,
do
explain
like,
that whole deal to me. I don't know anything about Chipotle
so
fundraising for
so
Swim Meet.
any there are a lot of businesses out there that allow you to have a fundraising event or an evening. So back when I was coaching in Lincoln, Nebraska, you could do it. I think it was like once every 6 months. You could apply for it through Chipotle. You had X number of hours through the front door, and you got 50% of the proceeds from the couple hours. I know Raising Cane's does that. There's a couple other things. And then you have your local businesses that might do something like that. You can do a ton of those, which is annoying. Or you can have higher fees and do some of those, or you can have higher fees and host meets. And that's where the tough part gets into, as you said, is like you have to host a quality meet. Okay, that how many meets do you have to host in order to balance the books? If it's unsustainable, then something needs to change, which is going to have to be your fees, or your your Chipotle nights or whatever it is. But yeah, I don't know. I look at it and I look at, like you said, the kinds of meets that are out there and the people having to slog through. 10 and under shouldn't have to sit through a 4-hour session.
No way.
And if they are a really good 10 and under, they should still only do 10 and under length meets and not like the fact
I would
that
argue no kids should have to sit through a 4-hour session. But it's a reality for a lot of them.
Like, I remember I posted that you could probably dig through the Coaches ID Exchange page, and I put a post, must have been, God, that was probably like 4 years ago, maybe, about the need for 10 and unders in prelims finals format. And there was a real small number of coaches who think they have to have prelims finals experience. Most people thought
That's why
it would
I'm
be
so
nice.
glad I'm not part of this group anymore, Eric. I could not take things like that.
A healthy and reassuring majority said it's not necessary for 10 and unders to go through prelims finals. But it happens here in Texas.
Yeah.
Texas Age Group World Championships.
Texas Age Group World
Championships. It's going on right now in Louisville, Texas, and 10 and unders are swimming prelims finals in some races. They don't even have enough kids to fill 3 heats in this meet for 10 and unders, but they have prelims and finals for them. That's if you make prelims finals at 9 years old, you're doing prelims finals meets for 9 years before you even make it the possibility of making it to college to do prelims finals races there. It's like, it's just none of it's sustainable. Like I'm surprised that we are able to continue on as we are as a dominant swim country. And that's maybe just because we're going by sheer numbers and volume and people are surviving.
Yeah.
Anyway, getting off topic a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of what you're pointing to that I think, and the point Joel was trying to make and what he sent to us too, is that, you know, that a lot of this stuff, this professionalization of everything, I think puts a heavy emphasis on stuff that I would argue we don't necessarily need to value with especially younger kids in our sport. That is like, these times got to be official, right? We got to like have electronic timing, and we got to have the officials making sure, like,
otherwise it affects their trajectory. Yeah, teenagers and college kids.
Teach kids the right way to swim. I'm not saying like have a swim meet where anything goes. You know, coaches and everyone involved should be teaching kids a legal way to compete in the sport. but it leads to such a heavy focus on times, and time improvement, when, that stuff comes pretty naturally, like up until the end of puberty for most kids. So you don't really need precision in terms of like, ooh, is this 10-year-old half a tenth of a second faster, than they were last week? Like, who cares? And just, they need experience showing up, having a good time racing other kids, and then going home and doing whatever 10-year-olds do.
Yeah,
I don't know
there's
yet.
more, there's more value in having them understand the logistics of being ready for their race on time and navigating, it's called, I guess in summer league, it's called the bullpen.
Oh yeah, I grew up with
It was,
bullpens.
it was, in the Midwest, we still called it clerk of course. We just sat in the chairs. They were all numbered. You had your card, whatever it was. And, there's more value in being able to navigate those situations than whether or not you got the double B time as a 9-year-old and how that's going to affect your ability to be a 12-year-old at the zone meet. I've brought this up before, and a coaching friend of mine in Nebraska, and his 10 and under format for a meet would just be the kids come in, the parents go up in the stands, they're given a newspaper and a cup of coffee, and there are no heat sheets. The only heat sheets that are with the coaches and the officials, and they just sit there and they watch their kids race, and they cheer if they want to. Otherwise, just read and let your kids have fun. And then after about 90 minutes, they go home, you have lunch, and then that's your day. Like, that's all that it should be. And that, for a lot of parents, there are some parents that do have that kind of experience, but not enough of them, to the point where we're not overdoing it with 10 and unders for time and unofficial NAG records being held by swim media companies, and that kind of thing. Like,
well, but here's what I'll say though. I even as I hear you saying that, I think to myself, yeah, of course there's some exceptions to this. Like, if you have, for instance, I think if you have an exceptional 12-year-old, I'm just, thinking that is beating the snot out of, all the 12-year-olds that they race. Yeah, you might want to get them into a meet where somebody will beat them.
Absolutely. Like, yeah, I'm not arguing
right.
against that at all.
No. But so I'm walking this backwards to where it ends up is, I think as a group, all of the parents are striving to get the best for their kids. They want the best for their kids. So if you tell them like, okay, well, this thing over here, this is really just for exceptional kids, what are they going to say? No, I want that.
Yeah. Well, your kid's not exceptional.
Who's going to tell them that? Eric,
I will.
Who's going to tell them that? Who's going to tell them that?
The brand rep has no problem stepping in and
telling you got a death wish with that message going around to parents.
What are they going to do? What are they going to do? They're going to take my coaching job away from me?
You're safely not in the coaching job. But yeah, so it's like then everybody wants something, regardless of whether it's really the best is the best. It's just what somebody that they perceive as the best is getting, and they want it for their, All right.
Then let's have honest discourse with the coach, and the coach has to do a good job of communicating where they are in their progression, and the parent needs to be open to hearing that. And that's a hard part. That's a hard thing for 2% of the parents, as we both know. There's no point in even having that conversation. But for the rest of them, it's just speaking to them as an adult, as you would with another professional, about the development of their child. And this brings me to a point with that too, that not to necessarily keep going, is that we forget how to communicate with parents. And I think the biggest thing, if any coach is still hanging on to this conversation right now,
they are, because this is the best swimming podcast in America.
Pretty
Eric,
much
I don't care what you say.
At this particular time slot on Thursdays, but being able to take what you're trying to communicate about a swimmer into the parents' world outside of swimming if you don't think like that as a coach,
Mm,
then you're not going to have as an easy time as getting parents to buy in. If you have somebody who is a CFO and you have a basic knowledge and understanding of the business world in any way, shape, or form, you have to take it to their world. You have to talk corporate. And if you don't, find a parent within your group or a coach on your staff that has experience in the corporate world and get a little background on it.
Yeah.
The number of times that I've had that kind of conversation with a parent where I put it in their world, or when I'm coaching a kid and trying to get a kid to understand how to be aggressive off the block. He played football. So I had to like take it to playing on the line and going forward to the D lineman versus down to the water. It instantly changes where they are in how to approach something. So bringing it to their level as an adult and maybe assuming that they're going to be rational versus always being ready for the parent to put their finger in your face and how dare you.
You have to be able to empathize with them.
Yeah,
Essentially,
more or less
you
is what
have
I'm
to be
getting
able
at.
to empathize with them. You have to be able to talk to them in a way that makes, like you're saying, that makes sense to them in their world, and also just recognizes that, you know, pretty much every parent you're going to run into, they just want the best for their kids. You know,
Yeah.
that's what they want. And yeah, maybe sometimes you're thinking as a coach, like, oh, what they want, they have no idea what they want. Fine. Then your job is to communicate to them what you, and convince them of what is actually best for their kid. And they'll be happy when their kid actually gets what's best for them, but
Yeah.
not if you just bulldoze around and expect that, it's my way or the highway. And
Yeah.
like, you will have to be forceful. You will have to sometimes, just forge a path straight ahead, but that essential empathy to the other people. And I hope anybody listening to this, again, my goal in the beginning was just to get some empathy for everybody that's involved with the sport of swimming and some of the challenges they're dealing with at the moment. Anything last to add, Eric?
I want to circle back. So Helena is not such a dire situation.
Okay.
I pulled up a cost of living
You
calculator.
did the background research while I was rambling.
A little
That's
cost
good.
of living calculator and comparing it to the next closest major city, which is Denver. 36 in Helena is 51 in Denver. So it's not below poverty line.
Okay.
By any stretch of the imagination, but it's still a difficult thing unless you are single and you have no debts. I mean, that definitely is something that's doable at that point. But
all right, I got to end this because in 60 seconds, my 4-year-old son will walk through this door and yell,
yes,
"Daddy!" And I don't want that on my podcast, even though
you just did it. Happy birthday, Chris.
Thank you. I'll talk to you later. And thanks to everybody for listening to the Swim Brief. And maybe we'll be back next week. We'll see what happens. Lots of swim meets going on, but we'll do our best. So talk to you soon.
Bye, Chris.
Bye.